All right. Hello, everybody. We are here for episode 34 of Eat, Drink, Write, and Urban Fantasy Whiteboard. Today, we're going to talk about another cliche and how to turn it on its head. This cliche today is about love triangles.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do that. But before we get to that, how was your week?
Oh, it was exhausting. I'm back at work full time like I was last week, but this time I've added classes. So classes started on Thursday, and it's been really hectic with making sure everything is ready for coronavirus and all these students to come back, which hint, hint, we're not ready.
Mhm.
But so that started, and all of my classes are on Thursday. I don't have any on like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So that was nice, but it is an 8 a.m. class, and then my other class is all online.
Ooh, 8 a.m. Gross.
Right, which isn't horrible because like I'm already up for work and like that kind of thing, but it is like an hour earlier than I'm used to and that kind of stuff.
So since you work, do you go to class online at work or do you go to class online at home?
No, I go to class online at work. I have an office at work, so I'm not around other people. I can sit in there and not worry about it. And I kind of lucked out on that because the person whose office I'm using is she's immunocompromised, so she's just teleworking. So she's working off campus these days, and she's like, "Well, you're welcome to use my office," and it worked out really well for me since I do have online class and stuff that I have to deal with and all that. So
That works. Okay.
yeah, so not
Well,
bad.
we'll see how the University of Georgia goes.
We're gonna shut down.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that we won't unless they just ignore the explosion of cases that's gonna happen. So
Yeah, Riley started classes and we're still all 100% digital in um, Georgia, well, in our county, Gwinnett County.
right.
But I think kindergartners go back in person on August 26th, and then it's staggered. I think Riley's class, being a sophomore in high school, she'll go back September 11th, I think, is her time to go back. Now, she's opted to not go back. She wants to go ahead. And at her age, that's easy.
Right.
I understand it's hard to teach a kindergartner through a computer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I get that, but I'm lucky enough that she's lucky enough that she's old enough to be able to do this easily. And, she's number 3 in her class. I don't see it being a problem for her to be able to learn. I do feel for those students who don't learn as
Yeah.
easily as she does, it's going to be rough, but
Yeah. No way. That definitely a more difficult year all around, I think. So
but my week, for me, we had our first full week of virtual court. So it was a very long week for me, 5 days. I'm lucky enough to be the host on these Zoom hearings. So I have a lot of administrative.
administrative.
I'm a writer, y'all.
Oh yeah.
Administrative things that I have to do in addition to all my law stuff that I have to do, because a lot of the cases on the calendar were my cases. So I had to deal with being the lawyer, but I also had to deal with being the administrator running everything. So it was extremely stressful.
They should hire someone, I feel like, to be the administrator for digital court.
It's not horrible. Our internet went down in the middle of the week, so
Yeah.
I had to use our hotspot, which is not as strong. Oh, it was terrible. The AT&T people came into our neighborhood and we're going along, and luckily I was on lunch break when it went down. But Riley comes out of her room where she's doing her virtual classes and she's like, I think the internet's down. The internet's down. I'm supposed to be online. What are we going to do? And I'm like, okay, chill. Log on to your hotspot, because we all have hotspots. And she's like, oh yeah, hotspot. Okay. So she was able to do that. And I'm going, oh my God, I have court this afternoon. I've got internet. What do I do? And your dad is like, log on to your hotspot. I'm like, oh yeah, okay.
Good Lord. I mean, I guess like you got to expect that kind of stuff to happen, especially like with everything being digital and like some kids, yeah, their internet's going to go down and it's going to be like, well, what, they can't be penalized for that kind of thing. And well, and then I can't say anything for you in your court. That kind of sucks.
I mean, we do have to work with these things. I mean, we had one defendant who is a truck driver, and he had a partner in the truck. So the partner was driving the truck, but because they were moving, the internet was bad. And the judge said, you have to pull over so that we can hear you. And he was like, we can't, we're under, time frame to get this stuff delivered. And the judge is like, I don't care. You're going to pull over. So they pulled over, and then we were able to hear him. So it was an interesting week. I learned a lot this week on how to do things differently for the September court date. I'm already jumping on that. But yeah, I'm really tired. It was a long, long week. I just served my drink. Speaking of, what are you eating and drinking?
Oh, I made some whole wheat chocolate chip waffles.
Ooh.
For my meal, and then I'm having my typical White Claw tangerine flavor this week.
So. Nice. I'm kind of on the tangerine flavor too. I've got the LaCroix, whatever you call it, tangerine flavor, and then I put lime in it and vodka. It doesn't really have a name. I might have named it before. One of our drinks that I made up was the right stuff, but I don't remember if that's this one or not. So that's what I'm drinking today. And then we had barbecue last night from Q Barbecue in Lawrenceville, Georgia. That place is my favorite barbecue place. And I had, we had ribs, and so I'm eating leftover ribs today. Those ribs are amazing.
That sounds great.
They're too sticky for me to eat and hold the paper that I have to hold. So I'm looking at them going, I really want to eat these. So I'll eat them shortly. So our topic today is love triangles. And I tried to find jokes about love triangles, but I couldn't find any jokes about love triangles, so I found jokes about triangles.
Oh God! All right, let's hear that.
I have 3 of them.
Oh, of course.
I told them to your father this morning, and I was just laughing. And he's like, number 1, I see where Jordan gets it from, and number 2, I'm glad somebody thinks they're funny because I was just laughing.
Oh my God!
Be prepared. Okay. Why aren't there many jokes about triangles?
Why?
Because some of them are obtuse.
Less.
Number 2, the triangle says to a circle, you're pointless. The circle says back, that's how I roll.
I like that one.
What kind of triangle is a tortilla chip?
What?
An isalsa-less triangle.
Oh my God. I like that one too. That one's pretty good.
Okay, so now we can talk about love triangles and the cliche that they are, and I'll turn it over to you to start.
All right, good. Sorry, I'm still reeling from the jokes. So I got a lot of my information from this blog, StoryGrid, and the particular article was 10 tips for writing love triangles that are not cliche.
Perfect.
Yeah, and it was written by Savannah Gilbo. So that's where I got most of my information that I will be talking about. Okay. So what is a live triangle? What is a love triangle? It typically involves 3 characters, but despite the name, it can also involve more than that. Like, you're not limited to just 3 characters. It doesn't have to be a triangle per se. That's just, the name of it. It happens when your protagonist has 2 or more love interests, and both of those interests compete for your protagonist's attention. And both of them love your protagonist. Like, there has to be, they have to be vying for your protagonist. Your protagonist also loves both of them too, but they should have to choose between one of them. And this type of trope is seen a lot in young adult novels, but I've also seen it used across genres.
Yeah, I have too. I've seen it in everything, but it does seem to dominate the young adult books. And I think that that's a good place for it, because young adults haven't had the experience yet. These teenagers, they don't know yet who they are and what they're looking for. They are just learning. So it makes sense that they would have 2 different people that might appeal to them and on some level. So that makes sense to me. That's what a lot of young adult books are centered on, as the coming of age and the learning of oneself. I was looking at the Urban Dictionary to find out what their definition was, and I found it amusing. The very last sentence in their definition was, love triangles, as it is widely agreed, really fucking suck.
Wow, that's aggressive.
And I thought, that is brilliant. Okay. Oh,
A
and
little bit.
I was listening to some of our episodes, and apparently I love the word brilliant. I use the word brilliant all the time.
Do you? I haven't noticed.
It is a lot. So I just said it again, and that's I caught it because I have been listening, and I say it a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure I have some of those words too. I don't know what they would be, but I'm sure I have some of them.
But I thought that was funny, and it is actually very appropriate because they do. You can't, in our society anyway, mostly, you
Right.
can't have everybody win in that scenario. So there's gonna be a bad ending maybe in some way.
Right. For somebody. Right.
Right, right.
Yeah. So, what are some examples? Bella Swan has to choose between Edward Cullen and Jacob Black in the Twilight series, which is a
Yeah.
big one. There are all the Team Edward and Team Jacob people. And I work with this girl. She's a new lab mate that I have, and she loves the Twilight series. So she'll talk about it all the time. She just read Midnight Sun, which is from Edward's point of view, Twilight from his point of view, and that kind of thing. And she's like, I'm always Team Edward. So she loved the love triangle thing. And then there's Katniss Everdeen, who has to choose between Peeta and Gale in the Hunger Games, which was also a big one.
Yeah. And both of those are young adult.
Yeah, they are. And I mean, like I said, they're mostly young adult is what I notice them in the most. And I don't know if that's because they typically do them all the same way, like the same style of love triangle, or what. I don't know why that is such a huge trope with.
Well, I think young adult, those characters don't know how to deal with it either. So you can have love triangles with people who are older, but they generally have the wisdom to go, this isn't the way things should be, and they aren't as, oh, I love this one, and oh, I love this one, like young children. Like, they're not young children, but teenagers are.
Right.
So I think that's why I think the main characters themselves handle the love triangles different than characters in other genres, because those other genres aren't necessarily young like that.
Yeah, that's fair. And one of the examples that I have is Mercy Thompson having to choose between Samuel and Adam in her series.
Oh yeah, and see, that's not young adult.
Right. But I think that's a really good example of, like, I didn't quite mind it because it's very different. The way that Patricia Briggs writes that love triangle is very, very different, and comes across like really well. I thought she did it very well. And I'm not a fan of the love triangle trope. I hate it.
Yeah.
And didn't mind it that much.
Mercy is also older, and so she did have wisdom going into this, realizing, I do have to make a choice, but she doesn't string them along. She doesn't, she's not like a teenager who doesn't know how to handle it. She, as the character, not just the writer, Patricia Briggs, but Mercy as the character, handled it different than a young adult character handles it.
Yeah.
I do think it's super common. I don't remember what I was going to say.
Okay. You had some of your own examples.
I don't even know where I am in this thing. I found it. I'm on board. I have not had. Okay, well, I've had a little bit to drink. So another one that's not YA is the Dragonlance series, which I think I've talked about before. It's a really, really old series. It's one of the very first fantasy novels that I ever read. It's based on Dungeons and Dragons. But the Dragonlance series, the main character, Tannis, is a half elf.
Yeah.
And his triangle is he falls in love with a 100% human, and he falls in love with a 100% elf, which makes sense because he is half of each culture, and he's trying to find a way to fit into both cultures. And so it makes sense that he would find a love interest in both cultures.
Yeah.
So I found that to be interesting. And then, from urban fantasy, you can have that idea with a half monster loving someone from both cultures or whatever. You've got the Bella Swan one that you were talking about.
Right.
One's a vampire and one's a werewolf. So two totally different magical, in our writing world, cultures.
Right, which back on the Twilight thing, I was reading a little bit more about it, and Jacob actually represents Bella's human life, even though he's a werewolf. Because if she ended up with him, she would have remained human. She wouldn't be anything other than human, and she would have grown old with Jacob and all that. And Edward represented this more immortal life, like a completely different life that she could have that would have led to a completely different future for her. Like obviously she's not going to grow old and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I thought that was like a really interesting way to bring that in. Was he represents one life that could be, and Edward represented another life. So I thought that was really interesting.
That is interesting, and I think that's how love triangles should work if you're going to write them well. There should be this choice. It shouldn't just be, oh, I like him because he has brown hair and he has blonde hair. I don't know which one to choose. There should be a lot more depth to it than that. There should be something that each individual love interest can give to your main character that they can't get from the other.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leaves the question of, do you have to avoid love triangles? And I don't think so. I mean, just the way that we're talking about it already, I don't think that there's anything that you have to do in writing. So by no means do you have to avoid it. They're cliche for a reason.
Right.
So they can definitely work. They have worked in the past. They can still work in the future. It just has to be done right.
Yeah, I agree. The love triangle itself, just because of what it is, creates that perfect framework for conflict and resolution. And conflict is what moves your story forward.
Right.
Let's be honest, we all love drama. I should mention that the new show that I'm watching is Married at First Sight. And it's the drama of these people meeting for the first time at the altar and all their progress as a couple. I mean, and I love it, and I hate reality TV. And so I love this show. And that's what I think we all love about reading a love triangle is it is so drama. It is so soap opera-y. And for some reason, as humans, we love that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you do it wrong, then it can feel cheesy. You could send your readers running for the hills, rolling their eyes, that kind of thing. So it does have to be done right.
Yeah, absolutely. How can we do it right then?
Good question.
I have a few points that I found that I thought were pretty interesting about going about this, because, and you know this about me, like I hate love triangle cliches. I really hate them. But reading about them and like doing research for this was actually really interesting, because I did find a few points where I was like, I'm totally okay with love triangles, but they have to be done, in ways that don't feel like they've been run into the ground and like that kind of thing.
Right.
So how can we do it right? Develop each character involved in the love triangle. So like love triangles create tension, drama, like you were talking about. And it makes you wonder, who is your MC main character going to end up with? Like, who are they going to choose in the end? And make sure we know that character. Make them realistic in their goals and their motives and personalities. Like, make sure everyone in this love triangle is someone that we as the reader can understand.
Yeah, don't cheat either. You can't, as the writer, that you want her to end up with this one in the triangle. And so don't make that other one lacking or one-dimensional or whatever. To be a good triangle, there has to be, like you said, you have to know those characters, and your reader has to be able to know both of those characters and know the depth of them and like them both and really be going, oh my God, what's she going to do? Who's she going to choose? And I say she, it doesn't have to be a she. It could be a male. It could be an all-male triangle or an all-female triangle or, any combination thereof. But I write mostly female main characters. And so for me, it's always going to be a female. Not always, but anyway.
Right.
But I do think that tension and that conflict is crucial to getting this done right.
Yeah,
there should be struggle. There should be discomfort. It should not be easy.
Yeah.
You really should be uncomfortable with, am I leading this guy on? Do I, like with Bella, do I want to live forever with him, but give up having to be able to have children and, miss growing old with someone, miss all of those things, miss laying out at the beach on the sun?
Right.
Or, do I want to be with Jacob? And, so both of those were viable. And like you said, the whole world was Team Jacob or Team Edward. So it
Right.
really got all of us into it. And that's because that author, Stephanie
Meyer.
Meyer,
Mhm.
did a really good job of humanizing and creating that depth of characters so that we could relate to both of them. She didn't lead us down a path where, oh, she's going to choose Edward, so we're going to make something wrong with Jacob along the
Right.
way. So.
Yeah. Yeah, which that you mentioned a really good point in there, and you said, both of them are viable, and that's actually my next point.
Okay.
Make sure they're both viable options for your main character. If one obviously doesn't fit your main character, then they're probably going to choose the other one. So where's the mystery? Like, where's that
Right.
tension and conflict?
Ah.
You want your reader to wonder just as much as your main character, like, oh God, like, who do I choose?
Right.
Kind of thing. So
Right.
just make sure they both fit your main character. And that way it's not obvious. It's not easy for your main character.
Or your reader.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You want your reader to be like, oh, you want them to be invested in this as much as you are and as much as your main character is.
Yeah.
Also, don't drag out the decision or have the main character like flip-flop between the two love interests. I think that's what gets me a lot of the time and why I'm like, well, like I don't want that. I hate it. It makes me bored with the story. I no longer care. If it keeps going back and forth, I'm like, God, just choose already and be done with it.
Yeah, that's no one likes a wishy-washy character, but I also think that that's why it's so prevalent in young adult books, because at that age you don't know what you want, and you are likely to be more wishy-washy because you haven't set yourself in your ways yet. You don't even know yourself yet.
Right. Which is fair. That is a fair point. I've just noticed, like, it makes me really frustrated as a reader to be like, all right, I don't care about this anymore. Just like pick one and let's go. Like pick one and stick with it and like deal with the consequence. I want to see what happens because you picked this person.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I guess it's like more likely to annoy me if it's like, oh, I choose you. Oh no, wait, but I love you so much. Oh no, wait, but I can't get rid of you. And like, whatever. It's just, move on. I get bored with that, and therefore I get bored with the story, and I'm going to end up not reading that book. So, but like you said, I guess it works for different age groups and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Make your main character actively choose their love interest, also known as do not kill one off so they have to choose the other one.
You can kill them off for other reasons, but don't kill them off for the purpose of having an easy choice.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's you were saying earlier, you don't want it to be easy for your main character. You want it to be very difficult for them to choose. And if one just dies and you're like, oh, okay, well, you're still alive, so I guess I'll be with you. Like, that just doesn't give the payoff that I want as a reader, I guess.
That was kind of one of my issues with Twilight, and I like Twilight too. I loved reading those books. I thought that they were fine books. I liked them.
Right.
But having, I guess this is kind of a spoiler alert, so if you haven't read them and you want to read them, don't listen. But she did kind of make it too easy. I mean, granted, she took it through several of the books, so you don't know, but at the end, he ended up being with the magical baby that was,
right.
To me, that was an easy out.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah, it didn't feel like Bella necessarily had to choose between the two of them, especially, because she had chosen Edward and it was always Edward, and it was pretty obvious that it was always going to be Edward, which again is like, there's no guessing there. You're pretty sure she's going to be with this vampire that she's discovered.
Yeah.
As opposed to this dude who, was a great friend and everything and ended up being a werewolf, but like she was still always thinking about Edward.
Yeah. And to me, I think it wasn't so much giving Bella an easy out that the author chose to do it that way, but to make the readers happy that Jacob wasn't left alone.
Right. Yeah.
I think given that type of book that it was, the reader base for that series did want a happy ending, and they didn't want Jacob to, there are a lot of Team Jacob people out there. And so the author wanted to make sure that Jacob had a happy ending too, which in a love triangle is not always realistic.
Right. Yeah. There's no way it could be.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah.
Another thing is, show your main character through their choice, like show their character through their choice. your main character's character is what I have written down, and that's why I stumbled over that. But show their character through their choice. You know, what's their reasoning, and does it make sense for your main character? Does it make sense for the love interest she chose and the one that she rejected? Or I'm saying she too, but again, whatever gender your main character is.
Right.
You know, does it make sense for them to have chosen the love interest that they chose? You know, who does your character want to be, I think, is an important one. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying about Bella choosing between Jacob and Edward was, you know, both of them represented different futures for her. And which one she wanted was about who she was and who she wanted to be. And therefore, you know, she chose Edward or whatever. Which love interest really encompasses who your main character wants to be.
Yeah, this reminds me of the Phantom of the Opera, also not a young adult, but does have the love triangle. You know, there is, you know, and there's other books too that I can't think of off the top of my head. Do you really want your main character, or do the readers really want the main character to end up with the Phantom of the Opera because he's a murderer? I mean, but then there are those people who see the hope within the Phantom and understand why he's the way he is.
Right.
And, you know, perhaps they think that if she had chosen him, he could have been redeemed somehow. I don't know. But, you know, he's a murderer. Yeah. So you know, I don't know. It's interesting. That one was, and yet when she chose Raoul, we all felt like, yes, that was really the right, well, I say we all felt that. I don't know that everybody felt that, but you know, that really was the right choice given how broken the Phantom was. And could she really have been happy? And is it really her place to redeem him or whatnot? Can he even be redeemed given what he had done? And so that just made me think of that. You know, does it make sense for her to choose the Phantom given everything, you know? So you're right. You do have to think that through. And I think they could have made that work. I think the author could have totally made it go that way, but it's a tragedy. So, you know, I don't know.
Right.
It's something to think about. It's
been a very long time since I've watched that. It's been a very long time since I've done anything with Phantom of the Opera, and it's really good. I need to revisit that.
Didn't I give you was it you or Courtney that got the music box? Who collected the music boxes?
I think that was Courtney.
Or it might have even been Jordan.
Maybe. It wasn't me.
I got the music box for the Phantom of the Opera. Gorgeous box, gorgeous music. I love the Phantom of the Opera. That's
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if she still has it. I bet it was Courtney because she really
was. That movie. Okay, it probably was her then.
Yeah. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
The next point I have is you don't have to start both relationships at the same time. It's your story, so like whatever works for your story is obviously going to be what you do. But it may not work for others. What others do may not work for you. You don't have to start both love interests from the start. They don't have to be vying against each other from the very beginning of your story. That's often not how life works. A lot of the time people come in at different times and you realize, oh, this person is actually a good fit for me, blah, 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 blah. You know, there's different ways to start a love triangle.
Yeah, I think that it would be rather unlikely that you would have both love interests start at the same time. I mean, I can see very well that a person might be perfectly content with this person that they're with, and then the second person comes in later, opening her up to things that she never considered before, which could lead to that, am I really happy with who I am? What, you know, and I can see that starting to have them at the same time. I don't know that how that would even work.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be done. You can do anything in writing, but I think it makes more sense and it's much more interesting to have them at two different times.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Establish the stakes within this triangle. So what does your main character have to gain or lose when choosing a love interest? And I think that goes back to, decide who you are in terms of your main character. Like who is your main character? What does each of these love interests represent for them? And what do they bring to the plate, kind of? And what does she bring to the plate or he bring to the plate for them? What
Yeah.
does your main character bring to the plate?
Yeah.
Is it a good relationship all the way around? And I think all of those things are important to consider.
Yeah. A good love triangle, I feel like should be a catch-22. Um, you know, it should be hard for the protagonist to choose. We don't want it to be too easy
Yeah,
although with Bella, we pretty much knew from the beginning it was going to be Edward. She loved Edward, but um, there were pros and cons. You know, the thought of being with Edward and never being able to have a baby is huge. A lot of women want children.
granted, they do have a kid.
I mean, she worked it out. That's another
Right.
thing. I mean, and she did it well, I think. I know a lot of people have a lot of problems with the Twilight series, but I personally really like that series. I thought she did well. I thought the story was done well. I thought she was creative in overcoming that issue where, you know, Bella might not be able to have children for the rest of her life, and how a lot of people, it is important to have children. Children are a huge factor and it's not for some people.
Yeah.
So I thought she handled that well, but there should be that catch-22, that choice of, I love this person, but can I really go without having a baby?
Right.
Or, you know, do I give up all the opportunity of being immortal and all the things that Edward can show me to be able to stay with Jacob, who is a dear friend, and be able to have a normal children and grow old together? You know, that there
Right.
was a catch-22 for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then kind of on that catch-22 thing, where something is too easy, is boring to read. You want to explore all the different kinds of conflict within that love triangle. So that would be like internal conflict, external conflict. How do each of the people in that love triangle react to things? Does it affect your main character in certain ways, depending on who she's reacting with?
Are there jealousy issues?
Right. Yeah. And how do they react? I think that speaks a lot to how a love triangle can be portrayed, and eventually who your main character does end up choosing will have a lot to do with how conflict is handled within that triangle.
Yeah, I really do think that conflict is huge in doing this right. That's what that's what keeps them turning the pages. That's why I turn the pages when I'm reading a book. It has to feel realistic. You don't want it to be contrived, and you don't want to just you think, oh, I need to add conflict and it needs to be this. Don't just try to cram that into your story because you think it needs it. You've got to make it realistic, and you can do that by asking yourself open-ended questions about what if we do this, and even write it like sometimes you do. You'll sit down and write a scene and say, okay, let's take that conflict and see what really could happen. Let's go that way.
Yeah.
And then you'll be able to look at it and go, nope, I don't really want to go that way, or, oh, this is better than what I was thinking. So
right. Well, that's how I end up cutting 18,000 words out of my books. So
this is true. But yeah, explore conflicts and ask yourself these open-ended questions on what works, so that you don't end up with this stale, cliched love triangle idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And piggybacking off of that, where does that triangle fit into your story? It needs to aid the story as a whole, like all types of subplots, I think, should aid the main conflict that's happening in your story. And then, make it interesting and twisty, but make sure it fits with the greater plot that you have going. I think,
Yeah, I mean, you could, I suppose, have that love triangle as the main plot line, especially in a romance type novel.
Absolutely.
But I think, to me, it's better to have it as a subplot. It adds more depth to your story, like we talked about last week sometime. Sometime.
Yeah.
So it does. It can be a subplot that adds depth to the story without detracting from the main plot lines. It can work as a main plot line, but to me it works better as a subplot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And then continuing on that idea, make sure there's a reason for including it in the love triangle, like including the love triangle in your story at all. So like, does it support your theme? Does it develop your main character in crucial ways that helps your stories? No matter what kind of story you're trying to tell, like you were talking about, like whether it's a romance or an urban fantasy or a thriller or whatever, like whatever you have, like if you have a love triangle, does it actually fit in with your story?
Yeah,
I think that's a big point.
definitely think that you've got to have a reason for it, not just thinking, I need some conflict. Let's throw a love triangle in here. I
Yeah.
think there has to be a reason for a love triangle, especially since it is so overused.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
if you're looking for a conflict to add to make your story more interesting, that might not be the way to go just for that reason.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be crucial to showing something like
Yeah.
a trait of your character, like you said, or a point plot, or something that ties the point plots together. It needs to have a deeper meaning.
Yeah.
Um, and then one thing that you didn't talk about was the resolution of it.
Right.
And usually in a love triangle, somebody's going to be hurt, and so it's hard to figure out how do you want to resolve this love triangle. But before you even start writing the love triangle, I think you have to have an idea in mind on how it's going to go. Now, sometimes the way that I write, I just write and things happen, and so I might end up with a love triangle that I wasn't even expecting. So,
Right. Yeah.
it might just pop up. But when you're editing and finalizing your novel, you need to think about what kind of resolution is going to be satisfying for your kind of book.
Yeah.
Like a romance, it does have to be a happily ever after ending.
For the most part, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's expected in a true romance novel.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. So, there's something to be said about that. Yep, this feels right. She made the right choice ending where everybody's like, okay, I feel bad for Jacob, but she did. This
Right.
is what is right for her.
Yeah, because you've definitely, hopefully, set up this story and built it up and built up that conflict and the tension and everything. And we want the readers to be satisfied with whatever we end up doing. And
Right.
there's a lot that goes into that, I think. So.
And I think in that particular series, that wasn't the main plot line. There were other plot lines going on in that whole series. It was a subplot. And it didn't get resolved in the first book. It wasn't the whole plot line of the first book. It went through several books. So you can leave it open in the first book, even in the second book. But at some point, you do have to have some kind of resolution, maybe. But what if you don't? I mean, I've watched movies where it's just open-ended, and you're like, well, which one did she decide? And you kind of leave it for your reader to decide.
I don't know that I like
that. I know, but it can be done, and it works in some kind of stories. Probably not urban fantasy, but Courtney likes all those weird things. I could see her liking a book where we just don't know. We don't know who she ends up with.
I feel like if it's a major plot point, though, like you're gonna have to have some kind of resolution. But at the same time, like I could see, one of those weird movies, whatever, where they end up just choosing no one and leave it at that. And that could also work.
Yeah, it can. Cressley Cole's young adult series, The Arcana Chronicles, she has a love triangle in that one. And it doesn't get resolved in book one. She carries it through.
I love that series, or I love the beginning of it, but I honestly did stop reading it a lot because of the love triangle, and she brings in the pregnancy thing and just blah. Like I stopped reading it because I didn't care about that
anymore. And that main character is definitely young adult. She is too young to, life was so easy for her up to that point. She was popular, she, beautiful, whatever. So she didn't have the wisdom to know how to deal with these two male love interests. And so she was wishy-washy, which made you just want to smack her upside the head sometimes as you were reading it.
Yeah.
But what makes your protagonist finally reach that, quote, right choice? You've got to think about, and we talked about this earlier, what does your protagonist need?
Yeah.
The whole point that there is a love triangle means that each of these love interests are offering something that fulfills something in your main character.
Right.
So what does she need more? If Bella had never had a child, was having that child more important, and that's why she would have chosen Jacob. What is her deepest need? Not
Right.
just
Well, and think about, the Mercy Thompson series between Samuel and Adam. Samuel offered, it was a nostalgic love. She loved him, when she was a teenager, and then ended up leaving because of, his choices in the relationship and that kind of thing. And then Adam represented more of like a new love, and he was, it was a lot more complicated than a typical, like, oh, I need this from this one and I need this from this
right.
one. It was more like he offers this to me, and I know Samuel from, I've known him for most of my life, and that is something very different from, oh, I know Adam, he was my neighbor and he just was assigned to watch over me, kind of thing.
I think if she had chosen Samuel, that would have been an easy way out for her. He was comfortable. He was someone that she knew, whereas Adam was different and challenging and exciting, and I think those were things that she did need.
Yeah.
And she was able to say, it's too safe for me to stay, and neither one of them would have been happy.
Right.
I mean, they would have been happy. It wouldn't have been that magical, true, passionate love affair that she has with Adam.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So she would have gotten something out of Samuel, and Samuel would have gotten something out of her, especially if she ended up being able to carry children.
Right.
And it could have been a comfortable relationship, but for Mercy, she is not the type of person who is okay with comfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, she chose the unknown, exciting risk of going with someone completely unknown. Well, he wasn't completely unknown, but that relationship was.
Right.
So
absolutely. And I think Adam fits her much better than Samuel does anyway, personally.
Mm-hmm. I do too.
And I think Adam gave her more of what she needed as opposed to what was, like you said, comfortable.
Right. And then what about resolving it with a nobody wins scenario where maybe she chooses herself? I can't, I'm not, obviously I have issues. If I can't choose between the two of you, I need to resolve myself first. I need to love myself more right now. And I'm going to leave you both, which is an interesting option as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I actually kind of like that one, where it's like, especially if it's an active choice of hers to be like, I don't want to be with either of these people because both of them either take away more than what they give, or I don't give enough to them, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Or I can't give them what they need, and it would be wrong of me to take what I need from them without being able to give them what they need, because it's something to think about. So I was trying to figure out, how to twist it up other than making it the old, the love triangle that we're all so familiar with, and making it better. How do we make it different? And so I was trying to think, in urban fantasy, there are some ways to shake that up. You could have the love interest be two different creatures, which was like the werewolf and vampire in the Twilight series.
Right.
You could have the love interest be rival magical factions, and so then you're getting the inside scoop on both sides of political issues or whatever. Is she with the resistance? Is she with someone who's with the resistance, but she also loves someone on the other side? And so it's a great way to explore the conflicts of your world as an urban fantasy writer. To that love interest itself could be a very important part of your plot line to get across the differences of the world.
I agree. I think, like we talked about last week, that's a really great way to add a lot of depth to your novel. You can get a lot of information across using love interests and where they come from, and what kind of political views come with both of them, and how does your main character feel about those views, and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you could do that. What if one of the love interests is a forbidden choice, and then it turns out that it's forbidden because the joining of those two magics creates something powerful, kind of like in Underworld. No, Underworld? Is that right? Yeah.
Where the werewolf, in the past, the werewolf fell in love with a vampire, and they were going to have a child together. And the thought was that child would be an abomination, in that case, that was really more deep-seated prejudice than it was any
Right.
actual abomination coming from the birth. But the joinder of those two species, we did see what happened when a vampire and werewolf merged, and it was more powerful than either of the underlying species, which could
Yeah,
be, in an urban fantasy, could be amazing. You could do a lot with that.
absolutely. I'm sure it's been done too. I would love to read those, but I haven't found one yet. So
Yeah, just Underworld was the one that came to mind for me.
yeah.
And then um, what if the main character loses and the other two end up together, whether romantically or not? Like, say the two, the resistance and the other.
Yeah.
What if they're able to join together and resolve the problem in the world, but to do so they have to lose her?
Yeah.
And so they choose healing the world or whatever it is over
Right.
having either of them having her. And so she's the loser. She doesn't get to actively pick. I mean, it's just something I was thinking about. Do you have to have a happily ever after ending? You don't have to unless your genre expects it. And then what if magic types? Yeah, I think I just said that. So maybe she does lose them both. Is something going on outside?
Yeah, there's a leaf blower walking by my door.
I
So
can
sorry about
hear
that.
I can hear noise, but it's not overpowering.
It's really annoying.
But even in that case where the two love interests ended up having to band together, whether it's romantically or not, book two might resolve that issue as well. You aren't bound by necessarily the choices.
Sorry.
But
No,
that
I
was all
agree.
I had. I was trying to come up with, how do we really make it different? Something that we've never heard about before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that last point that you brought up where you're not bound by necessarily one book in urban fantasy, especially. Urban fantasies tend to be more than one book. And I think it's interesting, not to drag out that triangle, but relationships do change and evolve over time. And so it would make sense that your love triangle and your books would as well, your story would as well. So,
Right.
I have an interview question.
Okay. I was going to say people's needs change too.
Oh, absolutely. No, I agree with that 100%. I think as, real life reflects, you change as you grow and as you experience new things. I would expect the same of your main character because whether they're fictional or not, they are also going through their own conflicts and things, and they're going to change over time.
Yeah, agreed. So what's your interview question?
Does every single one of your books include a love interest? And do you think a story has to include a love interest?
I think every one of mine does have a love interest. And I don't start out necessarily meaning for it to. It's just the characters, as they get to know each other, there's chemistry between them and it happens.
Right.
My Kada book that starts here in Atlanta and ends up in a totally other world. I had no intention of romantic anything in that book. And they did that all on their own. And it turned out to be a very strong subplot, was the growing of their romance in that book. I didn't expect it. I didn't plan on it. And to answer the other question, I don't think it has to.
Yeah.
But I do think that human beings are naturally attracted to other human beings. So I do think that there is always going to be that spark of interest that might, that the pheromones or whatever there. I do feel like it's a normal everyday human thing to have romance.
I agree. Yeah. No, I was thinking about it, and I think all of my stories also include a love interest, whether I meant for them to or not. Like in Mac, I totally didn't have one planned for her. I figured if she had one, maybe they would come along later or whatever. And then one of the characters just decided to up and be one, so that happened for that book. And I don't think that a story has to include a love interest. I think, like you said, a lot of the time it does just happen naturally, the way people interact, especially if you yourself as the author experiences attraction and like that kind of thing. But I don't think it's a prerequisite. I think a lot of people look for that in stories. because it's something that a lot of people can relate to.
Mhm.
But there are stories I think about like asexual characters and like that kind of thing, and so I don't think it's a necessity to have love interests if that's not exactly what fits your main character.
Yeah, I mean, and in certain genres, you don't even really expect it at all. Like in an action adventure,
Right.
that's not the whole point. I mean, but even in those, there could be, but there doesn't have to be.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I was just thinking, psychological thrillers.
Yeah,
There's not always love interests. I've definitely read somewhere there are not any love interests in those at all.
yeah,
So I definitely don't think it's a requirement, but I have noticed that I think all of mine do have love interests.
mine too. I can't think of anything that doesn't. I'm 100% sure every one of mine has love interests.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Neat.
thank you guys for listening. That was a fun episode. Our website is eatdrinkrightpodcast.com. That's really the main place to go to find us. You can contact us there. You can post anything there, comments, whatnot. You can find links to all our social media. You can find links to things that we've promised during episodes. Like there was one time that we were talking about the covers of books, and I posted what I was talking about there. Pictures of our food and drink. We are on Facebook, Twitter, yay, writing community, Instagram. We have our email. It's also on our website if you want that. Leave us reviews on iTunes or any of the other platforms. YouTube, we've got YouTube now. So leave us reviews. We would really appreciate it. Give us thumbs up. Support us at our Patreon. It's patreon.com/EDW podcast. We do have some special things just for our patrons, and we thank them very much. They are lifesavers.
Yes.
So I guess we will see you next time.
Thanks, guys.